Hello, and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. My name is Naomi Hurley, and today I wanted to talk to you about not believing everything you hear or read or see in a world that is so filled with different information being thrown at us all the time. Right. And even the things that I share and the information and knowledge that I include on my podcasts or in my park chats or in my Jork talks or even just in my socials posts, we shouldn't be believing everything that we hear, see, and experience from others because it comes through their lens, through their perspective. That is the aspect of critical thinking. So I've been lucky enough to do tertiary education. And one of the main points, one of the main skills that they teach you as part of that is critical thinking. And that's why a lot of people, when they're looking at trying to create conformity, are against that extra education, because when people start to look at critical thinking, they don't tend to believe everything that's put before them. They'll question it. They'll ask for more detail. They'll query different details to try and get information there. Now, a lot of my talking is around self-growth and self-help and development. But there are aspects where I talk a little bit to spiritual components of life and the esoteric teachings that I've learned through different courses that I've done, through different educational learning that I've done, and even through downloads that I receive myself. Now, just because someone of authority is saying something, it shouldn't automatically be believed. And I suppose a really good example of this is someone like Deepak Chopra. So he spent his whole career building this personality around spiritual teachings and spiritual life and guidance for people to follow so that they could live a more enlightened life. Yet we find out he's one of the names that are listed in the Epstein files. Now, if you're actually associating with those kinds of people at those frequencies and vibrations, and even if potentially you participate in some of the behaviors that align you with people that sit at that frequency and that vibration, then you're not a real spiritual person, right? If you're harming others for your own pleasure, that's not a very spiritual thing to do. And so sometimes we can get caught up in this popularity of someone and think, well, just because they're popular or just because they're rich or just because they've been focused or showcased on this particular show with this influencer, then what they're saying must be accurate. But it's not always the case. And so we've got to look a little bit deeper and actually find out if what we're hearing firstly resonates with us. Does it feel like we're in alignment to that? And then secondly, even if it does sometimes, start questioning that. Start looking at that a little bit more deep, on a deeper level, and start asking more questions around it. And how is that the case? So what happens if I show up this way? Or what happens if that scenario is slightly different? Is that still something we should be looking at? And so if we look at things like, one of the aspects that I look at is the do unto others as you would like done unto you. And it's something that's been included in the Bible, right? It's one of Jesus's teachings, and it's a Christianity teaching. And then if we look at other aspects of religion, they all have that same message of finding your inner power and sharing that with the world, of being compassionate to others. And again, the Buddhist tradition, they talk about oneness. We are one. So what we do to someone else is what we're doing to ourselves. So we need to be conscious and careful about the way that we treat others. And so when there's consistent messaging, we can kind of go, right, that's something that really does align with me. But where the messaging isn't consistent, then we can start having more questions and diving a little bit deeper and finding out, well, what really truly does resonate with me in this space? So let me give you a bit of an example. When I first started going into this spiritual element and this spiritual journey, I started learning about the Western element of chakras. So the most popular element is that we've got 7 chakras and they're aligned with the colors of the rainbow, those sorts of things. Now, while there's some accuracy in that there are 7 chakras, there's not only 7 chakras, and aligning with the colors of the rainbow isn't quite accurate either. If you have someone that can see energy and has a space of that, like I feel energy, but I can't always see it in that way. So someone that can see energy and can see the chakras will tell you that there's some chakras that have multiple colors. They're not particularly one color. So diving deeper into that and starting to do more learning in that opened up my perspective and my mind around that. Now, also thoughts are things. So if you want to associate a chakra with a color, then yes, that color is going to have some resonance if you give it that meaning. Right. So kind of contradicting myself, but not really. But if you truly want to connect in there and do more research on it, you'll actually find that, the heart has a lot of gold in it. And that's where the saying they've got a heart of gold comes from, because when they're actually giving and sharing and showing kindness and compassion, your heart chakra or your heart center grows, and then it comes in that essence of gold, right? And so looking at different things and digging deeper is how we can actually get a better understanding of things. I also, at one point, I get into a bit of sound healing. So I've got myself some crystal bowls, and I went to a sound healing group or class, and it was run by a particular lady. And as we were talking about our bowls and what we got them for and what we were doing and what our hopes were and aspirations were in that space, I actually mentioned that I was looking to get a bowl that resonated at the same frequency as the crown chakra, which is the chakra that sits up here, right? That's your direct line or the direct input energy center that has the space for the energy to come down through. So it comes in down through that main energy center, and then it gets sent to all of the other energy centers. And I said, I really wanted that and the third eye, because I wanted to expand the way that I look at the world and have more of a spiritual lens in the way that I viewed the world around me. Now, in that conversation, she kind of said, are you looking to increase some of your psychic abilities or your connection abilities? And I went, yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to do. And in front of the whole group, she kind of went, oh, people like you. And I'm kind of like, people like what? I didn't say anything, but I was listening. And she said, oh, look, the connection with your psychic abilities comes from in your solar plexus. And she talked a little bit about that. And so if I had have believed everything that she was saying, because she was the authority on it in the room, then I would have gone down that path. Now, as I learned to understand the energy system in our body better, I learned that, yes, she's right. You can connect with different people energetically through the solar plexus, which can then give you information from their energy. So some psychics do use that, right, when they're doing readings and things for people. But also, that solar plexus is all about personal power. So there's a little bit of ego that sits in there as well, right? And you would never guess that that is kind of what was coming out in the way that she spoke. Although she was speaking some element of truth, it wasn't the whole truth. And what she was speaking from was from her ego center, which is why she kind of didn't condemn me, but was condescending to me in the way that she delivered the information to the rest of the group. Now, as I've learned more, the actual, yes, she was accurate. That is a connection center, but it can have a bit of a filtered lens because of that ego element, and you're doing it from a space of your motivation. Whereas aligning all of your energy centers is what you need to do to get into that level. Now, I'm not a psychic. I don't do psychic readings. However, the more I've worked on developing the upper half of my energy centers, the more I get a knowingness information that comes through to me, which is really helpful when I'm doing the work that I do with people. So sometimes I've been in an RTT session and afterwards they go, oh, that phrase that you said was just perfect. And it's not something I would normally say, right? Or it's not my normal terminology. And I often find in these sessions that I get a tingling on the top of my head. And when my head starts tingling, I'm like, okay, cool, the good stuff's coming, right? And it's just like I'm a channel for the words that come out. So the top half of our system is set up that for a connection with your higher self. And the bottom half of the system is more of that grounding, more of that inner self connection that we have. So there's multiple elements of self that go on. So I hope I'm not losing everyone with this analogy that I'm using and trying to explain with. And so when you talk with people as well, a lot of the time when you're talking energy centers and chakras, they'll often miss that we have some in the back. Right. So you'll see just the dots down the front, colors of the rainbow. People, you can get different rocks and crystals that align with it, different charts and those sorts of things, but they fail to mention some of the ones in the back. So if we're looking at the ones in the back, especially our solar plexus actually has a front solar plexus and a back solar plexus, right? So when we are in states of worry, our solar plexus can flare up. And when our solar plexus flares up, then that can be a state where we're feeling anxiety, where we're feeling anxious about something, nervousness, those sorts of things. So that can react in ways where people will then go also, oh, I don't feel like I should do that. So it can come in different ways. It can come in awareness to tell us, oh, hang on, you need to protect yourself here, make a change in the decision that you're about to make. Or it can just, if we don't have confidence, it can overreact when we're going to do something that needs confidence from us. But also it stores information. So if we have a lot of worry, or if we have a lot of things that we're ruminating about, eventually it'll move into that back chakra space. And that's why when we do physical healing with people, if we're looking at backs, especially lower backs, there's usually a connection with pain in the past that the person hasn't let go of, right? Something that they ruminate about in the past that still sits in that back solar plexus energy center. And then that can cause a blockage, which can cause pain because things aren't working the way that they should. Also, if we look at the root chakra, right? So the one that does kind of sit around your pelvis area, and that's a lot to do with grounding. In the Western space, they talk about that as grounding and connection with the earth and connection with your physical being, which is completely accurate. But if you dive a little bit deeper, you will find that that also has connections with your prosperity. So your material wealth and riches in this life, and not just with money, but also with luck and with things coming your way. It also is an energy center around vitality. So if you procrastinate, then you're actually blocking that energy center from creating, right? If you're creating a lot, and if you're someone that gets lots done, then that's energy center is spinning or moving a lot faster, sending out life force energy into your body. So some people you might meet and you think, oh, they look really young. You might find that they're also very energized from an energy perspective. And that energy is actually keeping the other parts of their body in harmony and working really well to have youthfulness. So there's so many other different aspects. We talk about the throat chakra being, and the throat chakra is the chakra of expression and, you know, not having a voice. And I know sometimes when I've been presenting something, if it's not authentic to me, I'll often be, or I'll be coughing, or even if it is authentic to me, but I feel like I shouldn't be saying it, it can create a block in there. So when I first started doing work around talking around spirituality and esoteric teachings, you'll probably see in a lot of those videos that I have a bit of a frog in my throat, right? Trying to clear it, because one part of me, the logical part of me, is going, oh, don't do this. And, you know, my solar plexus is going, if you do this, you're not going to be liked, you're going to be rejected, you're going to be all those sorts of things, because they were my experiences in the past. But my throat was like, but I want to do this, right? And there's that misalignment. Now, even with the information I've shared with you now about that, you should have the ability to have discernment on that and go, actually, I don't think that really lines up very well. I'm going to go and do some more research and exploring on that. And even generally in life, when we look at things that are coming from the media, when we're looking at different aspects of politics and the way that they're sharing information with that, people will already have an emotional connection sometimes with a political party. So anything that political party says, they're going to disagree with, right? Or anything that particular person says is going to trigger them in some particular way. And if you find that you're getting triggered, that is the perfect opportunity to start doing more exploration and sitting in that and saying, well, hang on, am I triggered because of the topic, or am I triggered because it's that particular person sharing that information? And then you can go and start doing more investigation from that point. So I kind of call it I go off the 5 whys, right? So I've got a safety background, and in safety, when we did incident investigations, we would do the 5 whys. And what that means is we would ask the question continuously until we can get to a root cause. And usually it's around 5. So they call it 5 whys. So we would say, oh, I've been triggered. Why? Oh, that person's lied to me before. Okay, so why has that triggered me? Oh, that's because I don't know if I can trust them. Okay, why can't you trust them? Well, when I did trust them before, this kind of thing happened and I felt silly. Okay, why did you feel silly? Oh, because I didn't investigate it and I didn't do more research. Bang, okay, I need to do more research. That's the outcome of the trigger. Sometimes it's around healing. Okay, why did that person trigger me? Oh, because they've hurt me before or they've rejected me before. So why has being rejected before hurt you? Oh, because when I was a child, I didn't get the attention, or I was pushed aside, or I wasn't loved. Okay, so why does that actually impact you, and why is that now an issue? Oh, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel enough. I didn't feel loved and protected. All right, okay, so what can you do now in order to rectify that? Well, I can then go and do some self-love routines. I can put the affirmations on my mirror and tell myself. I can start journaling and look at all of the ways that I contribute to the world around me in a positive way. I can look at creating boundaries with that particular person as well, if they're not actually helping me become the best version of me. So you can kind of see there's different ways on that 5 whys and how it works. So I suppose, kind of in a bit of a summary, we've looked at the discernment, the critical thinking. Don't believe everything you're told. Don't believe everything you see. Don't believe everything that's happening around you as well. And now if we shift into that space, this might be a little bit too much for people to take. So if you decide to switch off and go to the next episode, or not listen to my podcast again, totally up to you. But if this actually triggers something in you, I would suggest you just do more research. So we come here in a physical body, in a physical shell. Some people refer to it as an avatar. Some people refer to it as a meat suit, whatever you refer to it as, right? And within here, within this space, which activates our consciousness, is something at a soul level. When we pass over, that soul energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transferred, right? That's a physics element. So that energy then transfers into a different space, which some people believe there's an afterlife. Some people believe there's reincarnation. Again, do your research, find out what resonates with you and what sits with you. Some people believe that that energy then creates more nourishment for the earth, and we become just one with the earth, and that's our space done. So from my perspective, I believe that we come into this meat suit, this avatar, this body, to have experiences. Not all of those experiences are great. Some of them can be really challenging. Some of them can be heartbreaking. Some of them can be physically hurt us as well, can cause physical damage and physical hurt and trauma. But that is the whole purpose. When people talk about life purpose, in my perspective, life purpose is about having experiences and then transmuting those experiences into something that's helpful for us or for others, other people around us. And that's kind of what I've done. Now, I have shared some of the experiences I've had, and when I think about them, I do tend to get a little bit sad, and I get sad for little Gnomes, for what she's had to endure and what she's had to go through. But I also have appreciation, because little Gnomes' sacrifices or little Gnomes' experiences have led to Gnomes of being able to help so many different people in different ways. People that have experienced trauma or child abuse or relationship breakdowns or betrayal through cheating, parents with alcohol dependency or whatever it might be. I've got this book of experiences that I'm able to go through and use the knowledge that I've acquired through that to then share and hopefully help other people with their healing processes with that as well. I also had, different relationships, friendships that haven't worked and why they haven't worked. And I have spent a lot of my life being a people pleaser and not being able to put up boundaries so I can help people in that space. So all these life experiences have come into that sort of space. And although I say this, sometimes that can be tricky to accept when you're amongst it. So if you have a loved one that passes and it creates absolute devastation, it can be hard to see how that could be beneficial. And granted, right? If you're suffering from a terminal illness, it can be hard to see how that could be beneficial. If you're watching a child go through a lot of pain and suffering from health conditions, or their life being taken from them. If we look at America with all of their school shootings, all those sorts of things, it can be hard to look at how that could be beneficial because it just seems so unfair. But the thing is, life isn't meant to be fair. Life's meant to be experienced. And we all have different experiences that we have. Now, in my belief system, from the experiences I've had, even with RTT sessions and also past life sessions that I've done with people, I've also done a lot of investigation into near-death experiences to try and gain a better understanding around that space. So when I come in to the past life regression sessions, I have some sort of knowledge around how that might play out. And from my understanding, we have a divine council. So we have a group of people in the spirit realm that sit there and help us along this life experience that we have, all the experiences we're meant to gain. But also before we come, we actually set up the experiences that we want to have. Someone might want to experience being tall. Someone might want to experience being short. Someone might want to experience life with a disability. Someone might want to experience life being poor. Someone might want to experience life being, wealthy in a financial sense, and see how that interacts with us on a soul level. Are we able to keep our authenticity? Are we able to still show up in a way that gives care and kindness and compassion across the world? Or do we become really self-centered? Do we really then start hurting other people to be able to make money, to be able to climb that ladder? Or do we hurt other people just so that we can have some sense of like, yeah, I'm better? All of those sorts of things. And then when we actually get to a point where this life ends, then we go in and we have a look at that life and run it over. And at that point, not only are we looking at our experiences, here's the kicker, we actually get the feedback from all of the experiences of people we've interacted with. So if we've hurt others, then we feel that hurt. And that is where the whole judgment comes from, in an aspect of people when they pass going, oh, they'll have to face judgment day. It's your own judgment as a soul, because when we leave the meat suit and we leave the emotions, thoughts, and physical restrictions that this suit puts on us, we have the all-knowingness again. We're back in that space and we see things from a different perspective. We see things from a oneness perspective. And then we have to actually process how we've interacted and inflicted other souls while we've been here. There's also a flip side to that, right? Sometimes we contract with other souls to create pain for us. And so sometimes other souls, I think all the time, before we actually come, we contract with those other souls to inflict that pain, to create those experiences for us. And the people that cause you the most pain in this lifetime may actually be some of your strongest connections on the other side. I know that's going to be hard for a lot of people to comprehend. And if that's triggered you, I'd love you just to sit in that and just explore why. It's usually because, and this was for me anyway, it's usually because it was really hard for me to think that someone that was that evil while they're in this human incarnation could actually have any goodness about them. And it took a lot for me to process and work through with some of the experiences that I've had from other people. So that one takes a lot longer and deeper thought patterns. Now, just because someone has been contracted by you to inflict pain on you, that doesn't mean that they should coast through life while they're here, right? They, in this lifetime, then have to suffer the consequences of that, whether that be ostracizing from community, whether that be jail time, whether that be possibly physical retribution or financial retribution for the pain that you've caused someone here. And that's part of the experiences that they choose, as their soul before they come. Now, if we look at what's going on in the whole USA space at the moment, when their current president got elected, my emotional state just dropped. And I was in a state of depression for a while over that. I cried. I had a physical reaction in my body. My energy centers were playing up. My emotions were playing up. And it just wasn't fair or just. Over time, there's been so many people that have been hurt by the decisions made by this current administration. And we learn even more, even though I believe victims, so I already knew that they'd hurt people. We're learning even more that the current administration and their affiliates have hurt people for a long time before they were actually in these positions of power. And I'm really disappointed to say there's going to be a lot more that are hurt as well in the future. But when I sit in that and I have a look at what that's doing to the world around us, at the moment now I'm starting to have a little bit of clarity, and I can see that the more that they rip the world apart and the more they show up from this place of an evil intent, the more awareness collectively people around them are getting. And the more awareness collectively that is happening around them in communities and in people like myself and sharing information like this, it's raising the collective vibration, right? It's raising the collective consciousness. And that can only be a positive thing. Now, I truly believe in the long term, this is going to be beneficial to the whole world. Do I think that's going to happen soon? No. I believe it's going to get worse before it actually gets better. And even when we look at ourselves from a point of healing, we usually have to hit rock bottom before we can actually start climbing up. And unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen in the world. But you can already see a little bit of hope in some of the decisions that are being made. You know, the current president was calling for assistance with the war that's currently going on in the Middle East. And although if you do deeper investigation, you'll realize that there's deep ties to the US from Australia and also from other countries in the world where they control more than just a military alliance. So, for example, in Australia, they're our biggest investor in the things that actually make Australia money. So they can impact us in great ways there. We have a military base in Pine Gap in Australia that even, I think it was Gordon tried to get out of Australia, and it ended up being that they ousted him out of Parliament and out of politics, right? Because of the power that they have and the influence they have. There's also a strong connection to Israel. You can research this and look at it, but there's a group called APAC, and we have big entities like the Commonwealth Bank, etc., that are actually part of that. So they're actually influenced by Israel as well. So then you've got the big lobbyists and the big billionaires that throw money at people and at different situations. And so there's a lot of fear that comes with not complying with the US across the world. And so the US recently reached out and said, hey, we need some help with this war. Who's up for it? And a lot of countries gave a little bit of support so that they could show that they weren't completely defecting, but was Bali's to going all in. So you can already see that there's a little bit of a shift, that we're not following them as blindly as what we have in the past, which is hopeful, right? So hopefully as a group, we'll actually, in this place of raising consciousness, we're going to start being focused more on the people around us. As the economy starts going out of control, we're going to have to help our neighbors. We're going to have to be looking for positions of reciprocity. I'm growing my own vegetables and fruit at the moment, and I'll be going and doing swaps with other people for food, I'm sure, at some point in time. So over the next couple of years, things are going to get pretty challenging for us. But we can either get caught up in that, or we can look at how do we function the best in this space. And that's just life as well. Life's going to throw things at you. We can look at getting caught up in that pain, or we can go, right, okay, yes, this is really crappy. Have acceptance about this. I'm allowed to feel sad about it. I'm allowed to be annoyed at it. But how can I make the best of this? Because otherwise you're just going to go into a state of full depression. You're not going to be able to function. So it's really important to have that discernment when you're looking at things. So it wasn't my intention to go deep spiritual esoteric in this session, but I think it does really fit with the topic because, I started this podcast off as a leadership podcast, even though it had leading from within. And then I've moved into more of a healing podcast. But most of my episodes have been kind of a bit superficial, sitting around psychology and those elements, a little bit of energy thrown in there. And this episode where I'm calling for people to have discernment, to not believe everything you're being told, to look at what are your critical thinking skills and capitalize on them. I just ended up going all in, right? It's going to resonate with some people. Some people, parts are going to resonate. They're going to go, yeah, that and that, but yeah, I don't really believe that. And that's completely fine. So I hope you've got some value out of this session, of this podcast episode. I actually feel like I had a lot of fun sharing all that knowledge. And I do feel like I'm going to be sharing more knowledge in that area around the energy space and around those esoteric teachings, because as I said, I feel like this world is consciously up-leveling. And I feel like these sorts of conversations and this information being shared is a part of the inevitability of that process of people starting to think a little differently and see things that they would normally have seen as themselves and internally as aspects that they're creating in their reality. Maybe we'll go into that in the next episode. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me in this episode, and I look forward to serving you again in our next episode.